The time is 4:05. First item on the agenda will be roll call.
Board Member Herron?
Yes.
Board Member Hightower?
Here.
Vice Chairman DeLauro?
Here.
Chairman Bishop?
Here. We have quorum and the meeting can go forward. So the first item up on business is consent items. It says 1A, consider approval of regular meeting minutes of May 15th, 2023.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Please take roll.
Board Member Herron?
Yes.
Board Member Hightower?
Yes.
Vice Chairman DeLauro?
Yes.
Chairman Bishop?
Yes. Motion passes. Order number 2, there's no items that were removed from consent for consideration, so we're moving on to item number 3. Informational items. 3A is the Parks and Recreational Managers Report. Mr. Ryan.
Okay, so we have had a busy summer. Roughly what I did for the monthly report is just a list of everything we are working on. Unity statue, we are waiting on the lights to be completed and the wiring so OG&E can hook them up. And we have contracted out the sidewalk to J&L Paving. So, and they'll get started on that as soon as the lights get finished, so we don't have different equipment over the new sidewalk. The lights at Carl Albert have been, the wire shorted out, so we are replacing the line, and we'll hopefully get to that as soon as the electrician's available. We are working on getting, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have horseshoe pits by Pavilion 2, and we got down trees in multiple parks. We also finished the skate park, getting the ramps installed, and I think that's it for Carl Albert. Bill and Miller, same old. We mowed. We're going to start working on leveling out the floodplains to make multi-purpose fields, and we're going to put some fall barrier and stuff around the playground equipment. We're waiting on grant for a new playground at Lloyd Plyler. It's apparently been sitting on the governor's desk for a while. They said don't start anything because they anticipate it signing soon, but we're actually about to start the next round of bidding for that grant, so I don't know what's going on there.
What's the dollar amount of that current grant? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember. It was a dollar for dollar match, so I put up what money we had donated from DCFA for the pavilions and lights around Dixon Durant and Carl Albert, plus I think another allotment of money that I had stored away, and now it's just sitting in limbo. I can't start on any of those projects until I find out about the grant, so most of that's just stuck. Dixon Durant, I'm going to start working on pickleball courts on that 2-court tennis area. We can fit roughly 6 courts in that little square, so all it is right now is just painted concrete. So we're going to just paint it concrete, put some sand in it to give it some texture. We'll install nets, so it'll be permanent structure for pickleball. And I'm working on grants for the Dixon Durant playground, getting a new structure there. And then pretty much the rest of the parks have been mowing, weed eating. Keithley Park, we had to replace the activator button since the last meeting because it was old and just needed replaced when we upgraded to the next higher up, so hopefully it lasts more than 2 years. Complex, we have shade structures still to build. We need to repair the outfield fence. We have installed benches around the playground equipment that were donated by Kiwanis. We had the rugby tournament out there. It was roughly 22 teams, 15 to 18 players, And the teams that came this year, that were here last year, have said we're 2 for 2 on having the best grass in the nation that they've played on. So I'm not planning on changing anything on that grass. We're just gonna keep doing what we're doing. Lake Durant, waiting on the kayaks for an installation date. I've emailed them multiple times. They just said, you're on the list. And I was like, where at? And they were like, we'll get to you. And I was like, okay, cool. So we're hoping that is sooner rather than later. And we opened up the hunting lease on the south side of the lake for bow hunting for whitetail deer. Again, that bid is up August 25th, September 25th, August 25th. Forgot what month we're in. So we'll get that going again. Pool, we sadly had to shut down early due to we had lifeguards walk out on last Thursday. So we only have 5 guards. With 5 guards, you can't have open swim and pool parties, and pool parties have already paid, so we go for that. And once school starts, you get maybe $50 a day in evening swim. So it was an easy saying, okay, I can't pay for lifeguards to be here when I'm getting one family that comes in. So overall, as of the July 31st, we've made $69,000 in revenue. We had over 5,000 people come to the pool, 136 swim lessons signed up, 77 pool parties. We did $14,000 in concession sales and 32 memberships. And our last day of pool parties will be August 20th.
When's the official closing date for the pool?
To open for the public, last Friday. But for pool parties, August 20th will be the last day that and then 21st we'll drain it and start work on getting bids to reseal it. Get the drain working. Apparently the drain for the pool has been sealed up and kind of makes it hard to drain a pool without a drain. So we're going to try to work on that too. We're going to extend the pump house so we can actually store the chemicals that we need to have on hand and make some much needed improvements to the actual what runs the pool. Questions?
The company that sealed it over, are they coming back to fix it?
I honestly have no record of who did it.
Oh, really?
That was done
Don't be looking at me that.
I think that pool was redone in 2015 or 14.
I can look back in the contract.
Yeah.
You want me to do that?
I think it'd be a good deal.
Yeah, because if they're the ones that sealed it up, I think they should be the ones to unseal it and at a heavily discounted, if not free. But since it's been so long and we haven't said anything, I don't know if they would hold us to it or let us hold them to it.
So how was it drained last year? Do we have a pump? when
We have
pumped it
a
out?
pump and a gas generator.
By the way, over on Carl Albert Park, and I know you're snowed under, I know you are, but with the tree.
There's 3 down trees or tree limbs in that park. Once I have guys, and we're not on mowing all the time, we will be getting that taken care of.
Any worries with replacing trees that have fallen? Like we need to grow some more to replace, 'cause I know we've lost a couple at Carl Albert.
The trees that we lost in Carl Albert, they were in areas that we don't necessarily need to replace. One of the biggest one, there's one the same size right next to it, so I'm not worrying about replacing it. The other one, there's that down limb that's half the tree, so I'm not
Yes.
worried about it. And there's another one by the skate park that randomly the limb just fell off, and we don't know why, when. It just one morning my guys came in and the limb was down.
This may be worth a question too. So when we're looking at Dixon Durant soon, do we feel like it needs more trees? I know trees take 20 years to even get a good benefit out of, but do we need to start thinking about 20 years from now? Do we need more shade in different places?
It depends on how big the playground area is going to be. Because if we start planting trees before we get that playground in, we're going to be having to maneuver around it. Once we have the playground in, then we can look at it and getting more trees. There's a pad that is supposed to have a shade structure on it. They built the pad, they didn't put the shade structure there. That's part of the DCFA money that we're supposed to do, is put a shade structure up. And so we'll have shade available. The playground equipment I'm looking at has multiple shade structures on the playground. That way, instead of buying a shade structure covers the whole area for an extra 30, 40,000, I can just focus on just the playground and have the existing trees be shade for benches around.
Okay.
I've got a two-part question here. The first is there a particular timeline for the pickleball? I guess that would be an adjustment, a movement from tennis to pickleball, but is there a rough timeline?
I'm hoping we can work on it this winter. Since all we have to do is really paint over it, it shouldn't take too terribly long. The hardest part will be getting the right measurements and getting all that set up, but that's still maybe a 2-week process for the whole, from start to finish.
Is there an allocated budget dollar amount that you're looking at? Hey, this is what we've got to spend here.
I know at least for the pickleball nets, you're looking at it can range from $700 to $1,500 net system that is anchored into the ground. It depends on how sturdy you want the nets being. I'd probably lean more towards the sturdy side, just because people like to use nets to bounce it themselves off of. But I'm shooting for no more than, I would say, $7,000 to $8,000 for the whole thing. Since all we literally have to do is paint over, seal up cracks, and go from there.
Kind of follow-up question. I know there's a lot of citizens that play pickleball, and this has been a topic we've discussed almost every meeting, but the one piece that comes to mind is looking at other cities, one in particular, Ardmore. They have an outdoor 6-court facility they can rent out. They run events. They charge $250 a day. Is it something where we could look at, there's the citizen group along with a couple nonprofits that can help assist that particular project to where we can actually do it, not just putting lipstick on a pig, but really resurfacing these courts the correct way, and kind of almost like a partnership with the city? Is that something that's possible?
I can't answer that question. I personally don't know if that's possible. I'd assume so. You can do donations to the city, and you can I believe you can earmark it saying this is for pickleball courts at Dixon Durant. I do know with surfacing, doing the correct tennis surfacing and all that, you're looking at $10,000 per tennis court size. So the price tag goes up quite a bit. Since people have been asking for these pickleball courts, I'm going with something that we can do quickly and then actually in the future spend. If we have a lot of people going in to play pickleball, refurbish it the right way. And because I know pickleball is a fast-growing sport, but sometimes those fast-growing sports die off real fast. And I don't want to spend a lot of money in refurbishing these courts that desperately need it for tennis if it dies out in a couple years.
Mike, are you saying that, I want to get a few more details. Are you saying that you would be working with an organization that they would be wanting to hire in work to do themselves and basically donate the court to the city? So they would be paying for it, they'd be designing it, they would be overseeing the entire project and then saying, here's city, here's this court? Or are you saying, here's a lump of money, city, you make this happen? How are you seeing this work?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a good question for the citizens, but the idea that they kind of had, that they shared with me is that, hey, if the city is willing to allocate X number of dollars towards this project, if being able to go out and get a bid for the full turnkey piece and it's X dollars, if this citizen group, hey, we've got X dollars to donate to the city, city's putting X into it, bang, let's make it happen. That's what was explained to me.
Maybe like a cost matching, kind of
Correct.
like a grant, so that the city spends X dollars, then this group says, we're going to give you a couple extra dollars above that because we want to have a nicer amenity.
So, for example, like to your point, say these courts are going to take 10,000 apiece. We're talking about 2 tennis courts that'll go into 4 to 6 pickleballs. In theory, if the city's willing to spend $8, $7 to $8, which is kind of rough, I know those aren't exact numbers, but say the quote bids come in and they're 35. Hey, the citizens know. Hey, we need to fundraise 27,000. Let's create an effort to do that. That's kind of the question. That's the initiative.
Hey,
I'd like to add to that. I like the idea. The other thing I'm gonna throw in there too is parking space. Let's say if they do start, having tournaments and stuff like that, parking, available parking.
at Dixon Grange Road.
Not pulling up on the side of the streets, because then you're gonna have some residents that are upset. They might not be able to get out of their house. So I think it's something that we probably need to look at, and wherever those are, so there's enough parking, enough area for parking for people to get in and get out. Because if you're gonna, get it together for tournaments and things like that, you need to have it where people can get in and out pretty easy.
That's a good question. So the location is at the middle school.
Mhm.
So there is parking available. And since it's the middle school, it's only staff that's parking there, because there's the students generally at that age are not parking any longer. So there's enough parking there in close proximity at the school building. You would still be walking.
Are you talking about redoing the tennis courts over there, or is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
those southernmost tennis courts that's just
Okay.
isolated by itself, the
Yeah.
2 courts, those are the ones I would make into pickleball.
Well, I think probably what I'll share with the group is just, obviously this is kind of what you've got planned, here's the rough timeline. If they're wanting to proceed forward, probably need to set up some sort of a meeting with you directly, just to kind of discuss those details. But I will say this, and this group is very motivated, they really want to see this, and this definitely is going to excite them, because they're going to see some traction. Hey, this is something we've been talking about for a while, since we had the Master Parks Planning meeting. Here it is. Maybe this is something they would be able to champion
Yeah.
alongside the city.
So then maybe you can meet out of session, and maybe the next parks meeting we could come back and say, here's a quote for option A, option B, option C in dollars wise. And then we can see what the city is available to budget. And then that would also let the citizens know, the citizen group, here's what you would have to match. And then we would be able to move forward at that point with what type of amenity we would want this to turn into.
Or at least like a recommendation, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the dollars that, you're being pulled apart like Stretch Armstrong. So I
Yep.
know that sometimes, and that's something that I think I'll make very clear to the group, is like, hey, this is the limitations. If we want to go above and beyond, that's probably going to fall on the group that really wants it.
Yeah.
And it's no different, I guess the way I kind of foresee it too, is no different from what the disc golf did when they had to fundraise about $50,000 to build the Lake Durant course. So that was something that was citizen-led and working with some nonprofits. So, I mean, it's doable. If it's been done in disc golf, it probably could be done in pickleball. There's a lot more people that this would attract to, that it's in a closer proximity. So
Yeah.
it could work potentially.
Does the existing concrete pad for tennis, is it in a good enough shape and good enough condition to still be functional? Or does it need to be built from the ground up?
The pad there's cracks in it, but it's
Is it
not.
still level or
It's
just
still
like
level.
just a gap?
It's just a gap, so all we gotta do is seal it up.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think it's probably just a resurfacing.
So you think it's still functional? It still has a good lifespan? It could have another 10 years of life if you...
As long as you seal it up correctly, it should.
Does the time frame when you cover that, resurface it, does it matter the time of the year? Because I know if I'm using an epoxy on a concrete floor, for example, it has to be warmer for it to seal together and glue. It's an inside thing, different material. Does it matter?
Not you can't have extreme temperatures, so one way or the other.
Okay.
So if we get started fairly quickly in the fall, it should be fine.
Okay.
Now, if we're trying to do this mid-February,
It won't work.
it won't work.
Okay.
Anything else?
I'm gonna ask something. Is there anything that you feel like that we could help you with?
Well, I just gotta get staff. Yeah. Right now, we're all really focused on mowing. I'm looking at once mowing, it finishes up here, either because it got so dry out that the grass isn't growing, or it gets cold enough that it stops growing.
Well, and you mentioned trees earlier.
Mhm.
Hey, shade's good to have, but if those trees are not about 8 foot at least away from each other, they're not gonna get the nutrients that they need in order to survive. One of them's gonna die.
Yep.
Yeah, that was making me, when I saw those down on the ground, I was like, those were some big trees. I hate to lose that shade.
Yeah.
That's where I was thinking at this time when I was bringing that up. I wonder if it's time for us to start reevaluating, do we need to start planting more trees places?
But like you say, I mean, once you plant them, you need to plan for that too, how far they are apart. I mean, they're great to have,
What kind?
but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Some are more, suck more water out of the ground than
Mhm.
others. Don't plant pine trees.
Okay. Any other questions for Ryan? For any other board members? Nope. All right, thank you, Ryan. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, number 4 and number 5. I see that, well, I guess next. Number 4, administration. Anything under administration? I see nothing on the agenda. Item number 5, new business. I don't see any new business on here in the agenda at the moment. So I think that we are ready to.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any particular people, is it the same people on the pickleball that's talking to you all the time?
Primarily, yes. And actually, it's interesting because I went down to Sherman. Sherman, they built a brand new pickleball facility, and just meeting with some of those folks. But I mean, of course, they hear the little rumblings up here, and I just know that down there, when they have, of course, numerous leagues, and I play in kind of the more advanced league. But they're like, man, if this happens, like, we would love to come up to Durant and just bring more traffic. And so it's been interesting to not only hear that, but then also I've visited with the folks in the Ardmore Parks and Recreation Department, how they were able to utilize the trust through their regional park there and how they built their pickleball facility. And so it's been interesting to see just the growth of it and the fact that it's all around us. I mean, Ada's in the process of their pickleball facility and converting some tennis courts into that. The university at East Central University in Ada, which is where my freshman year of college, I played tennis there before coming to Southeastern. They're converting their courts to pickleball courts. They've got northern courts and southern courts. They're transitioning 6 of their southern courts all into pickleball. So that'll be 4 courts per pickleball court. They're going to be able to have a huge facility to host events there on their campus.
When you're visiting with Ardmore, what type of foot traffic, and how many courts do they have, and what type of foot traffic demand are they seeing during the weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have those exact answers. I know that there's 2 facilities, one that's a 6-court facility and one that's 4. And then the process of building another 6-court facility, what they found is that 6 courts is just barely enough to be able to really host an event. So they've seen that, they've recognized it. I will say this, in their active Facebook page, they've got over 250 members that are involved in pickleball in Ardmore, but specifically like weekly traffic, I wouldn't have that answer, but I'm sure I could probably find out.
What do you feel like, I'm kind of going on here more, but on our local group that's traveling currently and playing at places in other towns, how large of a number of player base do we already have established that feel like they want to have it here and that would jump in as soon as it's ready to go, roughly?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say probably the number is somewhere north of 150. And I think that number is probably light. I think that there's a lot more out there that just maybe isn't familiar with the Facebook group or with what's happening. And the reason for it is there's just a limited number of facilities that you can play pickleball. Right now it's primarily at Choctaw Gym.
So I, a while back, did a Facebook poll for Adult Rec, seeing what people would like. We had 400 and something respond, which responding in a Facebook group is pretty good. 130 something said they want adult softball, and then 80 something said they want pickleball. So that right there shows you take at least half, and 40 are willing to play in a rec league when that plays once a week. And that's the people that actually saw the post. How many people would, I would say anywhere between 40 and 80 on a regular basis.
Could you give us a little bit of thoughts, or your thoughts on if we were to have an improvement out at the sports complex for pickleball? Is there a position that could be, is there a location there that you feel like could work? And if it could work, do you feel like it could be a foot track generator at that location?
Currently, with how our, like, putting pickleball courts where everything's already established, we're running low on space, because the only space that would be available is really either on the outside of softball towards the road, where it's that downhill slope, or outside of baseball. And I'm actually going to try to move the track hammer and discus throwing into that area by baseball, so they can stop putting craters in my Colton's field. So if we move that, that'd be the only area that that's established, because everywhere else like during the high school softball tournament, we have an area that's for bus barn, bus parking. Football has some in between football and softball, but you're not looking at enough space really for 6 court. You would have to look into on the expansion the area.
I think one metric I can kind of say to your response on numbers and metrics, when we think back to like the very first disc golf tournament we did in Durant, there was less than 40 people. Ardmore, over 200 came to a pickleball tournament in their first ever event. So, I mean, I think that speaks volumes. They're not only attracting people locally, but people from outside communities.
Do you feel like the resurfacing of the tennis court, okay, if we don't touch the tennis courts at all at Dixon Durant, are they functional the way they are painted currently? For tennis?
Oh, for tennis? I mean, middle school uses them. Nets need to be replaced. There are cracks with it. It's easy to fill, and they're functional.
Are we spending the same money for tennis or pickleball on this? Does it need the money either way?
Either way, yeah. Because if you went just to redo everything for tennis, you'd be looking at roughly the same. If we wanted to repaint, resurface, and the nets, it'd be just a little bit cheaper, just because you only need 2 nets versus 6. Pickleball, you'd have more investment, but I think since we have 4 tennis courts just north of it that are in the same shape, as if we say, okay, these are your tennis courts, and then we'll have pickleball courts down here, it would work out and even out long run, because I know the middle school still has a tennis team, but they also just built that big old tennis campus by the high school.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to continue having practice at Dixon Durant, or if they're going to start moving it to the high school.
So it just makes me think and wonder, would we have a more desirable location? Of course, I guess what Ryan's trying to do is trying to test the waters with the remodel. Is this going to have an impact here? Is it going to be something that's going to be popular? But the next thought is, well, what if we built it nice, fancy, and it does stick, we spend the money on it, we do it right, is it going to be more popular versus if we just kind of patch over the tennis and we kind of like look like, hey, we did a pickleball court? And is the vibe's not going to be the same with a refurbishment versus a brand new, of course, but I'm wondering if that brand new would generate enough lasting ability that it would give us more interest in it.
Well, I think the interest is already there. Getting a pickleball court in the city that is free for anyone to use, then it doesn't matter necessarily how good or how much money you spend in making the court, you have the interest. So if you establish getting we can even call them temporary courts, just getting the starter courts going, just so we can, when we get to the years of doing the expansion, do a massive pickleball court area, and we can have indoor or outdoor depending on what we decide in the future.
Okay.
Then you'd put the most of the money towards that. But for now, I think with the demand that I'm getting we go with whatever we can get in a quickly time frame, because I know I've been here for almost 3 years now. I was a month into the job before someone called me on the Park and Rec phone, and her name on the phone was Pickleball Lady, so I knew exactly what they were gonna call. And now I've talked to her a couple, and she's gung ho about getting this. I
Yeah.
played at Choctaw with them one day, and there's a steady group of 10 for sure that play on a weekly basis, and that's going to Choctaw, so people are allowed to play. And I have at least 2 or 3 phone calls a week that are asking about pickleball, or emails, or so
Okay.
there's interest already there. As long as we get a functional court where people can, if we can host rec leagues one night a week, and then on weekends once every couple months do a tournament, make sure it's not during the busy time of school, and just throw in a tournament here and there, you'll get the draw in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Ryan. I think as long as the surface, it's a resurfaced playing facility, I think that's going to be fine. And it's the fact that it would be dedicated and it would have just sole
Those lines.
pickleball lines. That's huge already too, because I know, speaking from experience, you play at some places, you got lines, you got 3-point line, you got a free throw line, you got 68 lines, and you're trying to figure out how to control this ball. So I think that right there is huge.
Also at Choctaw, unless they've changed it since when I went and played, it's temporary lines that they had to set out themselves. And I know at one of the churches, or they have a bus barn that they play in, and they painted it on the ground. So if they're willing to play in a bus barn, they're willing to play just about anywhere that's dedicated just for that.
Okay. Okay.
Let me ask one other question here. I know you got a lot on your plate anyway, and I know this has been gone over in city council meetings as well, but it might help on a large project that could possibly help you, just workforce. I know some of it has been an objection to what if one of them gets hurt. Well, I've used them in several school districts that I've been in, and the only thing they wanted out of us was they didn't want to send people with them. They sent their best, and they trained us in order to kind of be the watch guard, and gave certain rules and regulations for us, such as if one of them takes off, don't try to go get him, call us up. A couple of them gets in a fight, you call us because of bloodborne pathogens and things like that. So to me, that says they're not putting a liability on us. And I think that's one of the big objections that comes up into the board meetings, because of if one of them get hurt. Now, I know they were talking about using the force of inmates here in jail, right, at one time. But I know at one time they brought a crew at several times from McAllister. You also have Medill over here. I know they have one because I've used them before. McLeod, which is up by Atoka. So there's different ones. Now, it may be a little bit different, but it's just like anything else. You got to watch them.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? You can't go out there and say, okay, I trust
Have at
you.
it and then walk away.
That's right. But they do try to find you help that have worked in those certain fields. And I know from my perspective, when I used them, ones that I did have, they helped a great deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would help or not, or even if the city would go for it.
Yeah, I
You know
can't
what I'm
answer for
saying?
that.
You can answer that?
I can't answer for that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Any other comments for Ryan? Any other new business questions before we get to adjournment? Seeing no other new business, I'd like to have a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please take roll.
Board Member Herron,
Yes.
Board Member Hightower,
Yes.
Vice Chairman DeLauro,
Yes.
Chairman Bishop.
Yes, motion carries. We are adjourned at 4:40.